It all began on a quiet Tuesday evening. I had just finished tidying up the kitchen after dinner when I noticed the light above the island was flickering in a way that made my heart sink a little. It wasn't just a bulb going out. The wiring must be faulty, and I knew I wasn't going to touch it myself. My first thought was my neighbor Tom. He's always been handy, fixes things no one else can. And honestly, he's the kind of guy who seems to enjoy solving problems that most people shy away from. I hesitated for a moment. Tom is married, happily from what I've always seen, with a warm and gentle wife named Lisa. But I had no choice. The light had been flickering on and off for over an hour, and the shadows it cast made the kitchen feel colder, emptier than it actually was. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the phone and called him. "Hey, Tom, it's Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Sorry to bother you, but my kitchen light is acting up. Could you possibly take a look?" There was a pause on the other end, then that familiar, calm tone that always made me feel at ease. "Sure, Mary. I can swing by in 20 minutes. Is it bad?" I described the flickering, and he chuckled softly. "Sounds like it's more dramatic than dangerous. Don't worry, I'll bring my toolkit." When he arrived, the air seemed charged in a way I didn't expect. Tom always carried himself with ease, the kind of quiet confidence that makes you feel safe, like someone's got your back no matter what. I led him to the kitchen, where the light now seemed to flicker even more urgently, as if sensing his presence. While he knelt to inspect the wiring, I leaned against the counter, pretending to be absorbed in the neat row of spice jars, but really, I was watching him. There was a focus in his eyes, a softness too, and I felt a warmth spread in my chest that had nothing to do with the kitchen heater. Then he said something that made me freeze, though I couldn't tell whether from surprise or a sudden flutter of nerves. "Mary," he said, not looking up, "you really shouldn't have called me if it was just this. I like helping, sure, but it's nice being here with you like this." I blinked. That wasn't something you usually hear from a neighbor, or anyone, for that matter. My heart thumped in a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and a little frightening. There was no hidden agenda, no flirtation in his tone, just a quiet honesty that somehow made the air between us feel charged, alive. I didn't know what to say. I smiled, unsure if my cheeks were warm from embarrassment or something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. I guess I just needed help," I murmured, my voice softer than intended. He looked up at me then, and for a moment it was as if we were both suspended in a fragile space, a small room, a flickering light casting shadows that danced along the walls like quiet witnesses to an unexpected connection. The light finally gave way to a steady glow, and I felt both relief and a twinge of disappointment. Relief because the kitchen was bright again, disappointment because the moment we had somehow stumbled into was now over. Tom stood, brushing his hands off on his pants, and smiled at me, a smile that carried a warmth I couldn't quite put into words. "All done," he said simply. But his eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary, and I realized that tonight something subtle but undeniable had shifted between us. After Tom left that evening, I found myself standing in my kitchen, staring at the steady glow of the repaired light. It was almost comical how something as simple as a light bulb could leave me feeling unsettled, yet strangely energized. I kept replaying his words in my mind, the way he said it wasn't just about fixing a light, that quiet honesty in his voice. I couldn't help but wonder if he noticed the little flickers in me too. The next day I found myself more aware of the space between our houses. I'd catch glimpses of him trimming his garden or hauling in groceries, and suddenly a casual wave or nod felt like an unspoken conversation. There was something comforting about it, like being seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I told myself repeatedly, "He's married, I'm married, nothing more than neighbors." But still there was a pull that I couldn't quite dismiss. Later that week, I had another reason to call him. A storm had passed through the area, leaving leaves and branches scattered across my driveway. I debated doing it myself, but the thought of him coming over again, just to help, innocently, made my heart skip. So I called. "Mary?" he answered, voice warm, casual, but with an edge of curiosity that made my pulse quicken. "Hey, Tom. The storm left a bit of a mess. If you're free, I could use a hand clearing some branches," I said, trying to sound practical and neutral. "Of course. I'll be right over." When he arrived, I was struck by how easy it felt to be around him. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a shared understanding, a quiet companionship. We worked together, moving branches and sweeping leaves, and I found myself noticing small details I hadn't before. The way his hands moved with confidence, the slight crinkle of his eyes when he smiled, the calm steadiness in his voice that made the chaos of fallen branches feel manageable. We paused halfway through, both of us catching our breath, leaning against the edge of the driveway. I realized then how rare it was to feel completely comfortable with someone, even as a neighbor. The conversation turned from mundane weather complaints to stories of our childhoods, favorite books, and the odd little regrets we carried. There was a surprising intimacy in that honesty, a sense of trust that felt both comforting and a little thrilling. And then, in a quiet moment, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, Mary, it's rare to meet someone who makes ordinary moments feel significant. You do that." I swallowed, unsure if it was the dust from the leaves or the lump in my throat. I feel the same way, Tom," I admitted softly. For a moment, we simply stood there, sharing a silence that was rich with understanding. There was no rush, no need to define it, yet I knew something had shifted between us. Something unspoken but profoundly real. Later, as he left, I waved goodbye, feeling lighter and somehow more aware of myself. That evening, I found myself reflecting on the connection we'd begun to forge, not flirtation, not temptation, but a genuine recognition of another human soul. It was deeply emotional, unexpected, and profoundly moving. That night, as I sat by the window watching the last light fade from the sky, I realized that sometimes life offers moments that surprise you, not with grand gestures or dramatic turns, but with quiet, steady presence. And sometimes the most unexpected connections teach you the most about yourself. The days that followed were filled with a strange, quiet anticipation. Every time I saw Tom in passing, watering his plants, checking his mail, I felt a small thrill, like a secret humming beneath the surface of ordinary life. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just the excitement of a friend who understands you. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was an unspoken bond forming between us, fragile and compelling, and I couldn't ignore it. One afternoon, I found myself struggling with a stubborn cabinet door in the kitchen. It refused to stay closed, and after a few frustrating attempts, I muttered under my breath, "I really need Tom for this one." When he arrived a few minutes later, there was a warmth in his smile that made my chest ache in a familiar way. "This thing giving you trouble again?" he asked, kneeling down to examine the door. "Yes," I said, laughing softly. "I tried. I really did, but it just won't cooperate." He chuckled, and I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. As he worked, I watched him carefully, noticing the patience and care he put into every movement. He didn't rush. He didn't make me feel incapable. There was a respect in the way he treated me, as if my presence mattered just as much as the task at hand. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "Mary, can I tell you something?" I nodded, unsure what he meant, my heart already picking up pace. I think it's rare to find someone you can just be yourself with, you know? No pretenses, no masks. His gaze met mine, steady and sincere. "I feel that with you." I swallowed hard, feeling a warmth rise to my cheeks. "Hi, I feel that too," I admitted. We stood there for a moment, two adults caught in the quiet gravity of honesty. There was no rush, no pressure to define what we were feeling, just the shared recognition that something significant was happening. The world outside, the noise, the expectations, the routines, seemed to fade, leaving just the two of us in a space that was both intimate and safe. As he finished adjusting the cabinet, he stood and brushed off his hands. "All set," he said, but there was a softness in his tone that lingered longer than necessary. I realized then that this connection, this quiet emotional resonance, was changing something in me. It wasn't about desire or temptation. It was about feeling truly seen, truly understood, and feeling that in return. Before he left, we lingered by the doorway, hesitant to break the spell of the moment. "Thanks for trusting me," he said quietly. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." He smiled, that warm, knowing smile, and turned to go. I watched him walk back to his house, feeling a sense of calm and anticipation tangled together. That evening, I reflected on the strange beauty of unexpected connections. They didn't always arrive with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes they were quiet, subtle, like the gentle flicker of a light that slowly becomes steady, illuminating things you hadn't noticed before, about the world and about yourself. I realized that in those shared, ordinary moments with Tom, I was discovering parts of myself I had long ignored, my capacity for vulnerability, for trust, for deep emotional resonance. And while nothing had changed in the practical world outside my kitchen, inside me, everything felt a little brighter, a little warmer, and infinitely more alive. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm between Tom and me settled into something comfortable, yet quietly electric. It was never about crossing boundaries or seeking excitement. It was about presence, understanding, and the rare kind of companionship that sneaks in unnoticed until you realize it has changed you. I found myself looking forward to small, ordinary interactions. A shared smile over the fence, the way he paused to ask about my day, the subtle laughter we'd exchange while fixing something trivial in my home. One rainy evening, the kind that makes the air smell earthy and fresh, Tom came by to help me with a leaky faucet. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and inside, the kitchen felt cozy, almost like a sanctuary. We worked together in comfortable silence at first, the rhythm of our hands moving in harmony. I noticed how the soft lighting made the silver of his tools gleam, how the quiet concentration on his face mirrored the care I felt he gave to everything, including our conversations. Then, almost without realizing it, the conversation shifted to something more personal. He shared a memory from his youth, a moment of failure that had haunted him for years, and I listened, feeling the trust he placed in me. In that moment, I realized that what had drawn me to him was not just kindness or warmth, but the honesty that radiated from him. He trusted me with pieces of himself, and in return, I felt safe enough to lower walls I didn't know I still carried. I found myself smiling softly. "Tom," I said, hesitating, "it's amazing how easy it is to talk to you. How I feel comfortable, seen, understood." He looked up, and for a brief heartbeat, our eyes met in silence. "Mary," he said, his voice gentle, "I feel the same way. And it's rare, truly rare." There was a pause, and then he added, almost as if confessing a truth to himself, "I think that's why moments like these matter so much. Not just fixing things around the house, but connecting, truly connecting." I felt a warmth spread through me, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and quiet joy. It wasn't a rush of passion or fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something that touched the core of who I was. A sense of recognition, mutual respect, and the emotional intimacy that comes from being truly seen. The faucet was fixed, the rain continued its gentle rhythm, and yet the moment lingered in the space between us. We didn't need to say more. The silence carried its own meaning. When he finally stood to leave, we exchanged a look that said everything words could not. As I watched him walk back to his house, I felt a profound sense of growth. That flickering light that had started this all, it had illuminated more than my kitchen. It had shed light on the quiet corners of my heart, showing me that connection and understanding can appear in the most unexpected places. Later that night, I sat by the window, listening to the rain, reflecting on the past few weeks. I realized that the true gift of this unexpected experience wasn't about desire or excitement. It was about discovery. Discovery of another soul, yes, but also of myself, my capacity for vulnerability, for deep emotional resonance, for recognizing and cherishing genuine human connection. And in that soft glow of reflection, I understood that sometimes life's most profound moments are quiet. They don't announce themselves with fanfare. They arrive gently, like a neighbor offering help with a broken light, and leave you forever changed, in ways you never expected, but in ways you always needed.